your host, Lisa Kipps-Brown. And I want to tell y'all, I am really excited about this episode tonight because most of y'all know that I live in rural Virginia. And so many people think if you live in a rural area of the country that, you can't have a great business there. This guy, my guest tonight, Luther Cifers, is kind of like a local for me as compared to most of my guests because he's probably just like maybe an hour down the road from me. And he lives in the economic development region that is one of my clients. And I've been involved in economic development in Virginia, rural Virginia specifically, for about 15 years now. So I'm thrilled to have Luther Cifers on tonight. Luther is the founder of YakAttack, and the company has been in the Inc. 5000 several times. So, Luther, I'm going to roll it over to you and let you tell us about your background, your journey, how you got to starting YakAttack and got to where you are, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you having me on.
Mhm.
So yeah, I grew up in Central Virginia. Amelia County actually is where I grew up. I was born in Richmond. I think my parents moved to Amelia when I was like a year or something old. But grew up in Amelia, homeschooled from the third grade, and I actually didn't initially go to college. I got through school, rebellious teenager kind of situation, get out of home as soon as I could. And but I ended up I had worked for a few years in various like construction jobs and stuff like that in the summers, and then later after school. But when I was 19, I got a job in a manufacturing plant, actually two doors down from the building I'm sitting in now,
Oh,
um, called Carbone of America. Basically, it was a third tier automotive components manufacturer. So I started there at the literally at the bottom. I think the job I was hired for was the most the least skilled job and probably the least paying job in that building. But it was really interesting getting into that kind of ecosystem that a manufacturing plant creates.
mhm.
A lot of people don't. Well, the world has changed since then. YakAttack operates a lot like Carbone did. We do product conceptualization here. There, we would get the product concepts would come from the automakers, but we do the conceptualization here. We do all of the engineering, the prototyping, the design, and then after we get the products designed, we build the tooling.
Wow.
We do the manufacturing, we do the package shipping, all in four walls.
Wow.
So it's one of the things I love about manufacturing is it's like this ecosystem of all these disciplines, and it doesn't really matter who you are or what your natural skills are. There's usually something for you, and
Mhm.
and for me, you know, pretty naive, pretty inexperienced, other than, like I said, some construction stuff. I was just country boy, kind of situation. But I got exposed to some really cool stuff, immediately became kind of fascinated with the manufacturing process and, you know, high volume manufacturing and continuous improvement, all those kinds of things. So from, I went to work there in 93. And from then to, I'd say about 1995 or six, I kind of worked my way through the ranks in production. But ultimately, the pull, the gravitational pull was towards engineering.
Okay.
So yeah, so I kind of ended up there. It ended up kind of like a homegrown machine designer, an engineer without a title, so to speak.
Mhm.
But designed automated manufacturing equipment for a number of years, and my career took some kind of weird twists and turns. After I left there, I ended up working in a steel services company, and we had some bugs in the software we were using, and I knew just enough Visual Basic to be dangerous. So
Oh, yeah.
it started as fixing a bug, ended up a year and a half of rewriting the entire design suite for the beams that we were building.
Mm.
And then I went to work for another engineering services and software company, writing software for a couple of years. And then after that, I left that company and started my first business, which was a consulting company. And basically, I
Okay.
I did mechanical design for whoever needed it, everything from
Okay. I didn't know about that in between.
yeah, that was called Cipher Solutions. And basically, I just it could be anything from, some kind of industrial automation to, I worked on a women's shoes, designed for women's shoes, like a support as you go through the step, had a little metal thing in it. Anyway, I designed a tow truck for a company in Norfolk, Virginia, just whatever, kind of a hired gun, so to speak.
That's so cool, though. What a wide range.
It was fun, and it was cool because, you're as is often the human condition, the strength is a weakness, and sometimes the weakness is a strength. So I would go into these industries or these markets, with no understanding of them. Like I didn't know anything. I had never been towed when I designed a tow truck, but because of that, I just had like really fresh eyes. So what started as, a pretty simple modification turned into this whole new truck with, this whole different concept, which to this day I think is still, one of the most fully featured tow trucks on the market. And it was because of not knowing any better. Here at YakAttack, we say we only have the opportunity to not know what we're doing for a small amount of time, and then you start thinking like everybody else. So we try to keep those fresh eyes, when it comes to products, when it comes to business, when it comes to markets. But getting that exposure in all those different markets and realizing that truly the weakness is the strength, just trying not to get caught into the ruts of what's been done before. It was really fun. It was a fun job. But what I realized is that I was trading dollars for hours. And because of that, it was not a scalable business. At one point in time, I even was kind of looking to hire somebody, but to break through that barrier is really tough, because usually people are in that kind of thing. People are hiring on your reputation, and they want you to do the work.
Right. They want you. They don't want,
Yeah. And you could probably overcome that. But I realized that it was an uphill climb to get there, and it would be a difficult business to scale. And about the same time, a friend of mine and I started kayak fishing. And, I grew up around, I think my brother and I welded our first like makeshift go-kart frame when I was like 12 and he was 10.
Cool.
So I grew up around like kind of tinkering and making stuff. So, and my buddy Bob, who I started kayak fishing, same thing. We were both machine designers over at Carbone. We worked together for years. But what started as just kind of a homemade 360-degree light. So when you're out there fishing at night in the dark and boats are running around, you don't get run over. Initially, just kind of like a homemade DIY project turned into friends at the boat ramp asking, like, could you make me one? And then after a couple of months of that, we decided to start a little business. And YakAttack was actually originally intended to be a hobby business. We launched in 2009 in Bob's basement. And when I say launched, I think we had about 20 of these busy poles built. I started calling dealers and, trying to Google and find these kayak shops all over the country and see if they would buy them. I think like 98% of them said no. But we picked up a few, and a couple turned into really good customers. And, we closed that first year. I thought we might sell 100 lights, which would have been, I think we're selling for $60. So it would have been, whatever. We ended up selling like 700 of them.
Wow.
And that, even that, actually the numbers are a little bit off, because at wholesale, you're not selling at full retail when you're selling to dealers. At wholesale, I think we made like $19,000 on that. And when I say made, that's revenue, that's not profit.
Yeah.
Which left in the other thing I didn't mention is the money that we started the business with was like, we're both kind of paycheck to paycheck families, not a lot of savings, not a lot to work with. So it was kind of like what we could scrape together. But the little bit of profit that we made on that was enough to buy some tooling to kind of commercialize this homemade DIY light. And then the next year we just over tripled the revenue at 60,000. And it just kind of was like that. We, little by little identified different things that were needed in the industry. In 2010, the guy that I started it with, he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. About a year into it, it was, we're working a lot of hours after hours because we both have regular jobs, not getting paid for it. It just wasn't his cup of tea. But, I kind of doubled down the efforts. And because I had my consulting company, I was able to kind of meter my efforts there so that there was enough to keep from starving, but put as much energy. Once I realized YakAttack could be a real business, I just tried to allocate as much of my time
Yeah.
to that as I could. And then it was until I think 2013, it was investing every dime back into the business. I think 2013 is when I finally started drawing a salary, 2012 or 13.
Hmm.
And but it was like 20,000, 60,000, 180,000, 600, and just doubling and tripling for the first several years until before I know it, we kind of had a little business under.
That's amazing. I want to ask you when you first, well, first of all, $20,000 in the first year, there are a lot of small businesses that never, or that takes them years to get to that point, even when they're trying to do it full time. So that's awesome that y'all kind of did it accidentally. But when you were scaling like that, were you was how much of it was like y'all going out finding dealers versus people finding y'all coming and wanting to buy it versus e-commerce, that kind of thing?
So from day one, we had a really rough e-com site because we didn't really have a dealer base. We had one or two dealers in the very beginning, but it was brute force. I mean, I had a spreadsheet, and I would just go and just for hours I would Google like kayak fishing accessories, and then every state, and then whatever hits came up that looked like shops, I would open them up, get the contact. It was just brute force.
Yeah.
And the rejection rate, I'm not kidding. Like I remember one day I called close to 100 dealers, and I think I got two.
Yeah.
And of the 98 that I didn't get, more than half of them said like, "Don't call me back."
Yeah.
So then I would take the ones that said "Don't call me back" and just highlight it red, so I knew not to leave these guys
Hmm.
alone. And it was so funny because around probably about 2013, I started noticing. So by then, dealers were calling us. So in the
Yeah.
beginning, it was brute force going out, and then once the product started catching on, what was happening is the customers were going into the shop saying, "Hey, do you carry YakAttack?" And they're like, "What's YakAttack?" It's like, "Oh, it's this light." Back then it was mostly lights, but it was around 2013 or so. I realized like a lot of these dealers that have called us are the same ones that told me not to call them back. So I went back to my spreadsheet, and it was like almost every single one on there that was red was, I was able to turn green. And the few that were still red, some of them have went out of business and stuff. But with probably within another year or two after that, we all those dealers that were still in business, we had them as well. So it started one way, and then from like 2012 or 13 until really a couple of years ago, we did very little like proactive sales, like going
Hmm.
after sales. The industry was growing. We built a really solid reputation for being, from day one, we started this business on kind of some principles, how we're going to treat customers, manufacturing in the US, being novel and, having fresh, unique designs, not, just going out there and repeating what's already in the marketplace. And lo and behold, that stuff resonates with people.
Hmm.
So the customers really are the ones that drove the demand. And of course customers drive demand, but not necessarily. A lot of times marketing, you know it's kind of like the prerequisite to the customers
Yeah.
wanting the product. But in this case, we did very little marketing other than sending like products to like tournaments and stuff like that. But the customers were the ones that were, in the forums and later in the Facebook groups or whatever it was, trying to figure out how to rig their boats, figuring out that we had some cool stuff, sharing that information with each other, and that's kind of how it all started.
That's so cool. So yeah, so it was market driven instead of marketing driven. That's really
That's
cool.
correct.
And it goes to show you that if you have a product that your customers are passionate about, no matter how small it is, if you have something that they really love, then they're going to talk about it. And, especially when it's something like that that's for fun or a hobby or something, because it's an escape for them to be able to get out there and talk with other people that use the product.
Yeah, that's right. And then treating people well. I mean, that I see so many companies that you can see they spend tons of money on marketing, and then you have a warranty issue and they want to argue with
Yeah.
you. It's like you priorities are way out of whack.
Mhm.
And so from the beginning, I'll never forget the first quality problem we had. This guy uh, had gotten his Visi pole. He was one of the first customers, and we were in Bob's basement. It wasn't very clean. Like the same place that he worked on his lawnmower. You know what I mean? So we tried to keep everything tidy, but apparently he got his flag had some grease on it. So he was like, hey guys, I got grease on my flag. It's supposed to be a new product. So we're like, oh boy, we kind of first quality problem. Not quite panic, but like we better take care of this guy. So we sent him a new flag and we sent him some decals. And and we at the time we had like an orange flag, a Jolly Roger, and an American flag. It was three options. So I think we threw an American flag in there or something
Mhm.
like that. A little note apologizing for it, sent it to him. And then he went out in the forums and was like, "Oh, this is the greatest company in the world." And then we got a flood of orders. I remember, I remember Bob joking and saying, "We need another quality problem because whenever we whenever we take care of a customer, it creates demand." But it's true, and I think a lot of the times, and I've seen it actually with my own two eyes, a lot more than half the time. I would say when I see entrepreneurs getting started, they're so driven by the numbers and by the bottom line. I think it's easy to forget. Sorry about that. I don't know how to make that stop. There's it's easy to forget you're only there to serve a customer,
Mhm.
and when that cut and it's not a competition. I think a lot of businesses, even some more mature businesses, look at the customer as their competition for a
Yeah.
dollar, and it just doesn't work like that. You can kind of make a business like that, especially if you have a lot of patents or IP or something like that. But if you want a business that's fun and that's rewarding and, like you say, that's market driven instead of marketing driven, you have to treat people right. And I think we did that really well early on too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so when y'all were really growing fast like that, how many employees did you have let's say by the time you started paying yourself? How many employees did you have by that time?
Um, Probably like six or eight,
Okay. And that
and
was
then
doing everything from concept to design to manufacturing to ship to fulfillment.
so the first injection molding tools that we had made, we had contract,
Okay.
another company because we couldn't afford the equipment.
Yeah.
We didn't even have space for the equipment back then, but it was like probably 2012. No, about 2013, we bought our first injection molding machine. 2012, I think we bought our first CNC mill to make our tracks, and then we bought a molding machine, and then I kind of developed this process for making tooling because I realized quickly the machine might be, between 100, depending on the size, between 100 and $300,000, and you think that's a huge investment, but then you launch a product that's got 8 molds in it, that's another 200,000 or something
Mhm.
crazy. So I realized early on that because we were in the gadget industry and because we needed a lot of little parts, that it was going to be cost prohibitive. Our market wasn't big enough to
Yeah.
do all the things I wanted to do and justify that kind of capital investment, even if we had the money or could go get it. Um, so I developed this process for making tooling, and then I ended up hiring for production a really really bright young man, and kind of took him under my wing and trained him over a couple of years. And now he's our engineering manager. He runs all of that.
Oh, that's
Him and
great.
him and his team have built, I don't know, 300 injection molds in the last 6 or 7 years, probably more than that.
Wow.
Um, so it's just kind of blossomed, but yeah, it was, and even having like those 6 or 8 or whatever employees, I think probably by then I was the second or third highest paid guy in the company. And
Mhm.
that was the case for years. I mean, up until 2018 or 19, I always had a manager or somebody that made more money than I did. But I always had my eye on that longer term, prize. I wanted the
Yeah.
business to be successful and healthy, and I had what I needed to. We haven't lived extravagantly, so I had what we needed, and if there's anything extra, I put it back into the business, into another
Mhm.
product, or into the employees, or whatever. So it was it was a lot of years of kind of grinding it out, and I remember telling my kids, or maybe if I went to visit my parents, talking to my dad or a friend or whatever, yeah, I think next year, like next year, I think we're finally going to get over there. And it was like a perpetual hill that just kept growing. Because when you're growing like that, and keep in mind, this is no debt, this is all organic growth.
Mhm.
So you grow 200%. Well, that's an increase in inventory, that's an increase in receivables. It's an increase in labor. And some of that, and when you're building tooling, like you're not there's a return on investment next year. In the
Yeah.
meantime, that's cash. It's cash. So I was pretty. I really underestimated how tall that hill was going to be to climb. But once we got over it, then it kind of was like, okay, you know, now we can be a little more comfortable, start making more strategic decisions instead of just cash driven decisions. And yeah, we got a lot more fun. Then
I had
stressful every day is not fun.
no, it isn't. I had forgotten to mention that you did it all with no debt. That is amazing and very
it,
rare.
well, and I think again, it was actually I tend to pace when I'm on the phone, and it's funny because
I do that too.
I can remember certain phone conversations because of where I was pacing when the person
Mhm.
said something or what. It's so weird. But so I remember this was in when we were in Farmville the first time. So it was like 2012. I was talking to the financial controller for one of the kayak OEMs that we were doing business with, and we had kind of become friends. And I said, man, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I just can't seem to get this thing to produce cash. And he was like, well, do you mind sharing some numbers? And I was like, whatever you want to ask, I'll answer. So he asked me a bunch of questions and I answered them. And at the end, he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Like the cash isn't coming out because you're growing too fast.
Yeah.
The fact that you're able to keep up with that growth and sustain that growth, you're doing some things really good with, as far as cash management. He's like, keep doing it. And it took a few more years before, that really produced anything. But it
Yeah.
turns out he was right. The whole time we were doing really well. It's just, we were on a small amount of revenue. We were supporting the functions of a larger business. Setting up a manufacturing operation when you're only doing a million or two in revenue is tough.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, when we started our new boat dealership that I mentioned earlier, yeah, it was like every cent you made, plowing it back in because you got to turn it back into inventory and everything. And most people don't have the patience. Well, I don't know if it's patience that you have, but the determination and the self-control to, be
Yeah.
strategic about it and to not spend the money when it comes in. I spoke with a friend of mine the other day who has a friend whose business about 6 months ago, he was telling me the business was exploding. He just was rolling in money. He had paid cash for this really expensive car. Everything was going great. And then something happened in that industry and he is just like bottomed out. And,
Mm-hmm.
my friend tried to tell him because he was like his mentor. He kept trying to tell him, don't spend all this cash, or, invest it or invest it strategically in the business. But he's like, woo. So,
Yeah, I think a mark of I'm not here to. I'm in no position to judge what's a
yeah.
real entrepreneur and what's not.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, one of the marks of a real entrepreneur is they like the farming as much as they like the fruit,
Yeah.
and maybe more than they like the fruit. And I've seen that too. Actually, I've had people that I've done business with and been burned by, that you watch them, you see their businesses kind of going a little bit well, and then next thing you know, they're buying boats and this and that, and the next thing you know, they're not paying you.
Hmm.
And if your goal is to live a lifestyle, good luck doing that with a small business if you're trying to live this extravagant lifestyle. If that's your end goal, your priorities are probably so far out of whack, like you're not going to have the stamina to do, or like
Yeah.
you say, the self-control or the discipline. You really have to love what you're doing. And
Hmm.
for me, it's not easy. Like, love what? Injection molding machines, tooling. It's kind of hard to love that stuff,
Yeah.
but if you're working in an industry that you care about, if you have employees that you care about, you've got your family that you care about, you know, and you find some purpose in what you're doing. I think, to me, that's like that's like the fuel to kind of get you through those tough times, and not just get you through, but to enjoy it. I mean, all those tough years I talked, the stress wasn't fun, especially in a few moments, throughout
Mhm.
that time. But it was all enjoyable. I'm in
Yeah.
here tonight. I'm actually making tooling tonight. We've got a product launch coming up, and we're shorthanded in engineering. And anyway, got a couple of really hard work, actually a handful of really hardworking guys that are trying to make this happen. So I'm pretty free this week. So I've been in here. I was in here this weekend. I'm in here tonight. Plant's empty, and I had to walk back to the back of the building to get the forklift, and just walking through. The lights are kind of out. Everything's kind of quiet, and just looking around. It's like, man, it's just unbelievable. What's here and where it started, and I can't really look back and think of any, you know, period of time, any significant period of time that I didn't enjoy it. There
Uh-huh.
were moments I didn't enjoy, but there weren't years I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
You know,
That is amazing. I have chill bumps thinking of you, walking through and real, just looking at it because you get so busy day to day, you kind of, can't see the forest for the trees. You're not thinking of it. And then you take that step back and you're like, wow. It's kind of like, your kid, raising your kid and taking a step back and that, oh my gosh.
yeah. Well, I think I'm in the grandfather stage now because it used to be like that. It used to be like, wow, I did that, or I
Mhm.
did that. I look around now. I mean, I'm back there. The guy that I trained, this guy who was, I mean, he was hired as a base level employee. He had to retrain me to make tooling because he's progressed that technology so much. I mean, he had to.
Wow.
It was like where I left it when he took over, and I went to more in running the business and that stuff. I mean, it's progressed so much. He had to kind of catch me up, and it took a couple of days to get me up to speed enough to be effective. So now it's like looking at what your employees have done,
Yeah.
and especially some of these employees that came here with no career, great potential, just not that many great jobs around.
Mhm.
Um, that's I think that's kind of like well, and I've got older kids, so it's the same thing. You see them being really successful, and it goes
Uh-huh.
forward.
Oh, I love what you just said because that's an example of that. You have to have people who are able to learn and that you trust and that you are willing to let them do what they're capable of doing because so many entrepreneurs want to cling on and micromanage everything. But if you can surround yourself with people that you trust enough and let them do what they're good at and reach their potential, that's there's no time, no limit.
Yeah, I'll tell you that over the years, the employees that accused me of micromanaging were the ones I couldn't trust.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're right. Like I do vaguely remember that transition when you learn that you have to let go of some things, you have to delegate. But for a while there, I thought, and I kind of believed it. Like I'm struggling with that, but then I got some really good people, and it was so easy. It was the
Yeah.
easiest thing I've ever did. I said, here, you do
Yeah,
that.
because when you're in that transition, you know that if somebody messes something up really bad, that could be like a death toll for you. And so it's really scary to let go. So to be able to get to that place that you have those people, and I love that you're located in this very rural area where most people think, oh, you can't manufacture in America and be profitable. You got to get stuff from overseas and wait forever for it to be shipped here, and then it's crap when gets here. And I just love that in this very rural area you're able to hire people who have been able to learn so much. You've helped them grow and they've helped you grow.
I think rural areas, and particularly like farm communities, this is a generational, farm community, for like 150 years or 200 years or whatever. And even up until about a generation ago, farming's changing now. It's getting more
Yeah.
consolidated and larger, and there's less of the. It used to be everybody around here was a farmer, or half their family was at least. But I think that if you've ever been on a farm or spent any time on a farm, like you have to figure out how to do stuff.
Yeah.
There's not someone to help you fix the tractor. Like if it's really bad, maybe there is, but you're not getting work done that day if you don't fix it yourself, or you know, like my grandfather, my dad, my uncle, they could all just make things that did things.
Yeah.
They were, none of them were trained engineers, but they were all inventors of some type.
Hmm.
And I think that there's that kind of stored up potential in an area like this. I call people talk about common sense. I call it farm sense.
Hmm.
In people who have that kind of farm sense, they can just figure out how to do stuff, and those are very trainable people.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
I like it. It's sometimes a head count can be an issue. Just finding the people.
Yeah.
And it's taken it really only in the last 3 years or so have we gotten this business to a point that we can be really competitive with wages, and we're getting so much better every year now that the business is really humming. But yeah, I think the quality of labor, the amount of experience for what we're doing is very low. There's not a lot of manufacturing around, so there's not a lot of experience. But the quality of the people and their trainability is very good.
Yeah. You said about farmers. My grandfather was a farmer, but I didn't grow up on a farm, but I did have to pull tobacco, and I hated it. But I'm so glad I had to do it because when you know what hard work is. But I was going to say, my father was blind, and I've realized as I've gotten older that growing up with him is a large part of the reason that I'm able to think like I do because he did anything he wanted to do. He didn't let stop being blind stop him. And so I lived my entire life of him just figuring out how to do what he wanted to do. He had a wood shop in our basement with a lathe and all this stuff. But I love what you said about they made things that did things.
Hmm.
Yeah. Daddy built a horse trailer that was highway legal to carry his horse to our cabin up in Roanoke County. So, but yeah, they made things that did things. I love that. So, for people out there who are currently buying things from China or wherever, and especially with COVID, that's been a real jolt. For years, I've been telling people, okay, fine, you get it cheaper over there. uh, Most of the quality, a lot of it is iffy, but all the transportation, everything, what's going to happen when you can't get it? And then COVID showed that. So for people that really got dinged with that, who might be thinking, oh, I ought to try to start my own manufacturing, do you have any tips for them?
Yes. So the forces that drove, you know, that drove manufacturing overseas, I mean, it's just cost, it's
Yeah.
labor, but the time when that kind of mass migration happened and the technology that was available then versus what's available now. Look, there's no substitute for hard work. I don't care how much technology or whatever you have. There's no substitute for that. But people who are hardworking, who are willing to kind of grind it out and figure it out and learn and all of that. The amount of technology that's out there today. I mean, we have three 3D printers that run almost 24/7. Just one 3D printer would have cost as much as one of our molding machines 20 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And these things they're almost disposable at this point. So between that, the CAD systems that are out there and the prices on those, the CAM system, like the technology has never been better to manufacture domestically. Never been better. And then, like you said, the supply chain issues from COVID really has exposed the weaknesses of this kind of importation law and the tariffs. These are all things that you can't control as a business owner. You want to control as many variables as you can. It's tough enough if you can
Yeah.
control the variables. When you have a bunch of variables you can't control, it's difficult. So yeah, I would say all the technology's there. Um, it's a problem finding people who have experience doing it. So what we had to do here is we had to teach ourselves.
Mhm.
And when we did it, like when I started making tooling, I remember a friend of mine who's, 20 years experience or more in injection molding, and he said that's a horrible idea. He said, don't make your tooling. Like that's a distraction. If you want to be
Mhm.
a tool shop, go start a tool shop, but don't try to make your tooling. And I couldn't get away from the numbers. Like I can't afford the tools.
Yeah.
I can't afford the tools for the stuff that I want to build. So I didn't have any choice. I thought he was probably right, but I thought we'd have to do it for a while. He's 100% sold on it today. You were asking before the show about the Matusa manufacturing, and we ended up starting that business together, built the tools for all of these products ourselves, very, very low launch cost. Because we went through that year. Well, at YakAttack, I had been through that year or so of developing the means of doing it. It's funny, you watch our sales curve, it's like, or it's like this, and then it flattened, and then it started going again. And that flat year is when I was focusing on trying to figure out how to make tooling instead of building new products.
Oh, okay.
But the dividends that has paid since, and I think that's kind of one of the principles of of successful entrepreneurship. Play the long game. Like,
Yeah.
you have to play the long game. It's too easy to play the short game and think about every little thing that's going to help you today. But a lot of times you sell out your future doing that. And
Mhm.
at the time when we were, making things here, making tooling here, doing all this stuff, a lot of people would look at that and say, "Oh, sucker, you would make a lot more money if you were doing it." But then you turn around and have a situation like COVID, and it looks like we're geniuses here. Our material costs, because a big part of our cost is labor, right? Because we have employees, our material cost is actually a fairly low percentage of the cost of our product. So we just increased our inventory, and fortunately we were all, with the great resignation, wages are going up. We were already in a cycle as the business has become more profitable. Without any urging, we have been raising hourly wages. So we were already kind of, you know, had positioned ourselves well to be competitive in a labor market where wages were
Uh-huh.
going up. And I'm not going to say it was easy. We ran out of some things. We have some, like, stainless steel hardware. That's People aren't making that in the U.S. except like military grade. 10 times the cost. Something like that. So we've got a few components that we have to deal with from suppliers, and some of that's coming from overseas. But the 90 something percent of what we do is made right here in this factory from raw material. From resins and stuff. So what used to be a disadvantage turned into an advantage, and
Yeah.
that's the way principles work. You stick to something you believe in. It's not always going to be, you know, the most opportunistic or expeditious thing to do, but in the long run, at least, no matter what, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, you've been true to yourself, and
Mhm.
more often than not, like, solid principles produce solid results in the long
Yeah. One thing I'm really proud of with being from a rural area, over the years, I have so many different economic development clients. And when I work with all these veteran owned companies with the NASCAR driver, you're familiar with what I'm doing with that. So I have a lot of companies, veteran and military spouse owned companies that I work with. And I've always told them, if you ever need anything and you can't find it, let me know, because we have a lot of great companies in this area of Virginia. And so what happened is, when COVID hit, one of the guys called because he has a product that required sewing, and the companies that he had been using couldn't do it. They weren't letting people come into work and so forth. So I called, Jeff Reed, I believe. Jeff, who was with Virginia's Growth Alliance, or you've met him,
run.
Jeff Reed.
No, I may have met him. I don't. Yeah, I may
Okay.
have
Well,
met him.
anyway, I called him. He was still with VGA then, and he connected them with a company in Clarksville. So this company that was going to have no products was able to keep producing and keep filling orders, and especially at a time that was really needed, because the product that they made, everyone they sold, they gave one to a veteran. And so with COVID, it made it even more, the type product they had, it made it even more critical that they were able to keep producing. So I was just really proud that our little area, rural area, that people think, oh, you have to be somewhere bigger. So if there's anybody out there listening who might be in a larger area, closer to a metropolitan area, but they have thought about maybe trying to move somewhere more rural, do you have any, like, advice or anything that you would give them, anything to look for?
Well, I think it really depends on the business. For us, because we grew this business brick by brick, we were able to kind of acquire talent, train the talent, acquire talent, train the talent,
Yeah.
for a larger business looking to relocate, that can be a little bit more difficult depending on how many people they're going to get to move with it.
Hmm.
But I would say that if you can make that transition, um, as long as there's enough rooftops to support the number of employees that you need, I think small towns are fantastic places to do business.
Yeah.
Even little things like just being involved in the community,
Hmm.
and that kind of stuff. Like it's very fulfilling. I had a kayak company down in Greenville, South Carolina, and there's no amount of anything that we were ever going to do in a rotomolding factory where it was 100 degrees in the summertime, 100, probably more than that, that was going to be impactful on the community or on our employees that could go work for BMW down the street.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's like, but here in Farmville, I know for a fact we've made a difference. And the employees know that. So you
Uh-huh.
get some loyalty in return, and it's not just. I'll tell you right now, if you peruse our parking lot tomorrow when everybody's here, no less than 50% of the cars have YakAttack stickers on the back of them.
That's cool.
And that's the kind of atmosphere that we have here. We're a family.
Yeah.
We're a family with a goal and a mission and expectations and accountability and all of that. But it really is a family here. You've always got your outliers, the 80-20 rule, but I would
Yeah.
say 80% of the employees here are very engaged, are proud to work here, proud of what we're doing, and they feel a similar loyalty to me and to YakAttack that I feel to them.
That's
And I
great.
don't think you get that the same way in the larger areas. I think
Yeah.
labor is a commodity and jobs are a commodity in these
Mhm.
areas.
Totally agree. Here's a message to you from Jeannie. Hey, Luther, bring
Jeannie,
Yak Attack to Greenville.
so
This,
Jeannie was our customer service manager at Bonafide Kayak, so we were in Greenville.
oh, okay. Well, hey,
Yeah,
Jeannie.
hey Jeannie.
No, we don't want him to come to Greenville, though. I'm sorry.
Oh, this
Well,
is definitely home at
yeah.
this point. Yeah.
And my dad was a business owner as well. And the thing about small businesses and locally owned businesses, they're such an important part of the culture of a community. And you really realize it. Like I have people coming up. He owned a music store. I have people coming up constantly. He's been dead now for like 25 years or 26 years, but after I moved back from Florida, people all the time who tell me, all these wonderful memories they have from his store. And that's what small businesses are. They're such a big part of the fabric of the community, supporting the sports teams out there, doing all that stuff, but also just literally being part of a family, whether it's because of the place like a music store or whether it's because of the job for the job being provided like from you that is supporting raising a family.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny seeing Jeannie's comment there. Kind of started bringing back some memory. We had a core group even down at Bonafide, and like I said, there was a lot of competition for labor. It was really hard to get people
Yeah.
to come work because there's so many manufacturing jobs around. But our core team there, I think a lot of those guys still say to this day, that was the most that place felt more like a family than anywhere they worked. And yeah, we really had a good thing going. It was bittersweet. We merged that company with
Mhm.
another company called Big Adventures, which is a great home for the brand. I mean, they have a much bigger team and manufacturing and all that stuff. Um, but it was tough. That was one of the toughest business decisions I ever made. I'd gotten spread too thin. It had to be done.
Yeah.
And I think in the end it was good for Bonafide, but that was tough. That was tough. That was a really really good team we had down there.
Yeah. Well, it's great though that it was picked up by them and that the product and that it's still going and it's a big company that can support it, right?
Yeah, well, and it's a big small company.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
maybe three or four times the size that we were. So it big, but not too big. It's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
a company that's ran by people who talk to customers and know their dealers, and you know what I mean, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So it was a good home. It was a good home for it.
That's awesome. Well, do you have any tips really quickly? I've had you for 45 minutes, so I don't want to keep you too long, but do you have any tips like since you were able to merge that company with another one, do you have any tips for anybody who might be considering trying to have merge their company with another one? How to find that right marriage or whatever?
Yeah, that could be, at times it can be, it can be difficult. It depends on your market, but there's some really great like investment banks out there that are really
Mhm.
good at doing that matchmaking. In
Oh,
this case, we were in the same industry, so it was a little bit simpler than that. But you know, I've met a few of these different investment banks, and you find I prefer like in general dealing with smaller firms, whether it's
yeah.
law firms or accounting firms or whatever. But you find one of those small firms that's practical and that gets it. They can really take a look at your business and let you know what they think about that. If they if it's kind of ready for that, if it's
Mhm.
a business that would be attractive to another business, and then you know, if they believe it is, they have the connections to
Yeah.
kind of do that for you. And it's a very complicated process. Like there's a
Oh,
lot you have to go through in due diligence and the agreements and all that stuff. Like it's very legally complicated. So having somebody like that involved that can kind of help walk you through that, I think would make it a lot easier than I just kind of had to figure it out.
yeah, trying to do it
And
all
I had a
yourself.
law firm, but it was anyway, it was a
Yeah.
very difficult process. But no, I mean, and one of the things I think every entrepreneur has to think about in this case like that is, usually if you're going to merge with another business, particularly if you're merging up to a larger company,
Uh,
is you're no longer, you're going to lose that control. So
yeah.
that's something you have to be comfortable with. For me, it was more than comfortable. It was kind of necessary because I just got spread too thin. But I've known people and seen people that can be a that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the key in business in general is to really know yourself and know what you want out of it. Know what's driving you and what's motivating you, and try to make decisions around
Well, I love that you said that because that's what my book is about. Shameless plug here, Disrupt Your Now. That's exactly what my book is about because so many people start a business and they do what everybody else is doing. They're like, yeah, I want to start a business. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to be in control. And then they build what everybody else is doing. And then they wonder why they're miserable. And basically, they've built a job or they've built a business that isn't the type of thing they want. So I'm really big on helping entrepreneurs figure out what they want and then reverse engineer, figure out how they can use their business, either adapt an existing business or build a new business that will get them to that. So I'm
that.
glad
Yeah,
you
I
brought
mean,
that
by
up.
by definition, the beaten path is the easiest one to figure out and has the least amount of fruit on the trees. If you want to find the good stuff, you're going to have to get off the beaten path, which means it's going to be harder.
Yep.
It means you're going to make some mistakes. It means you're going to, run into some, uncrossable rivers or whatever it is, or have to figure out how to get over. There's always going to be those kinds of challenges. But if you want to find the good stuff, yeah, I agree 100%.
And you're going to get laughed at or whatever, like y'all did with the
Oh yeah, of
tooling.
course.
Yeah. So you have to be ready to accept that. Well, Luther, so okay, so it's January. Before long, people are going to be getting the spring bug to go fishing. Well, I'm sure some people are fishing now. Even up here around Virginia, we live on the lake in Halifax, and I see people out every day. But
Yeah.
with the spring coming, the average fisherman, fisher people will be at. So tell them about YakAttack, where they can find out more about your products and where they can buy them at.
Sure. So we make basically YakAttack is a line of accessories and mounting solutions. Started in the kayak industry, we're seeing more and more customers in like John boats and stuff like that
Oh,
that are utilizing our products now. And everything from fishing rod holders to fish finder mounts, cup holders, tackle organization, all kinds of stuff. And product line you can find at yakattack.us. We've got a really good YouTube channel with a bunch of information on the different products, and most of the kayak fishing Facebook groups, the people there are pretty well versed in YakAttack as well.
cool. Thank you for your time tonight, Luther. I'm
Thank you.
so excited to finally meet you. I know we've emailed a few times, but I'm so excited to finally meet you and get to talk with you and learn more about your journey. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. See y'all. See you later, Luther, and everybody else. I will see y'all next Tuesday night. Thanks. Bye-bye.